Guys, thanks for being part of this. We really appreciate it. It's a terrific piece of movie making, and as I've kind of reflected, I'm the only person who was alive when this actually happened. I was in ninth grade, but it seems like for you, Sacha, this was almost as long wanting to be part of this. Is it true you wanted to? This film was first written 13 years ago, and ever since you wanted to be part of it?
Yes, 13 years ago, Aaron Sorkin had written this script. Steven Spielberg was directing it. I found out about it, and I called up Steven Spielberg and asked him to let me audition. And after a long process, he finally gave me the part. And then the movie fell to pieces. And then it went through various incarnations over the years. I'd heard about Abby Hoffman in my 20s, actually, because I'd studied the civil rights movement, and I'd done a thesis on sort of Jewish radicals in the civil rights movement. He was one of them, who then went on with a bunch of others to form the basis of the anti-Vietnam War movement. So yeah, I've been sort of obsessed with Abby Hoffman and this movie for a long time.
And Eddie, were you familiar with the trial before getting involved?
I wasn't at all. In fact, it was a moment in history that I was pretty ignorant of. So for me, it was just a script that arrived, written by a writer whose work I adored. Most actors love Aaron Sorkin's writing because he writes very intelligent characters who speak incredibly quickly and are basically substantially brighter than you are. And so you get to come off as if you're brilliantly intelligent for a film or two. But it was a moment in history that I couldn't believe I knew nothing about. And the more I delved into that moment, but also to the character I was playing, Tom Hayden, the more admiration I had. It was an extraordinary time.
You know, you mentioned Aaron Sorkin. It seems like whenever we talk to any actor, that to work with him is one of those bucket list type of experiences. Is that the case for you?
Absolutely. People often go as an actor, like, what part do you want to play, or who would you like to work with? And I've always quite enjoyed not knowing, and just things arrive, and they're often things outside your comfort zone, and you kind of take a risk. But the one person who was very much on that bucket list was Aaron Sorkin. So I basically said yes to this film before I had read the script. But as Sacha said, I wasn't attached for 13 years, but I was attached for a couple of years, and it kept falling apart, the film, and it kept getting so close to being made and then not. And so when eventually we found ourselves in Chicago with this extraordinary troupe of actors, it was a dream come true.
You know, this is the first time you're portraying a real person, somebody who existed in life. And you're portraying Bobby Seale, which to me, that was like, well, no pressure there. When you're portraying somebody who is so iconic, is there more pressure to feel like you, quote, get it right?
You know, I never really interacted with the word pressure around this. It was an honor. And I think the word that comes to mind is responsibility. You know, I grew up in Oakland, definitely knew about Bobby Seale being a hometown hero. So for me, I dove into this with an opportunity to honor his legacy, you know, to honor the work that, that he did in Oakland as a founding member of the Black Panther Party. So, you know, I dove into this with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm for Bobby's story and, for the role that he, played along in this trial.
You know, you guys didn't get a chance to spend much time together before you started filming. And given that these are such disparate characters coming together, was that something that in a sense kind of helped you, when you were interacting?
I would say that the thing that unified, I think, everyone was the common cause. You know, I think everyone, in terms of the defendants, we all were portraying characters that went to Chicago for a unifying cause. And they didn't conspire to go together, but they were on the side of change, on the side of I think on the side of righteousness, and then they found themselves being lumped together. So I think, as actors, some of us knew each other, some of us did not know each other, but I think I like to liken our situation the same way. We found ourselves in the same room, with the same cause of, telling this story, telling this great story from history, that was designed to inspire change. And I think that, we fed off of each other in that way.
Sacha, here's a film that was written 13 years ago with an event that happened in the late 60s. Are you struck by the fact that this film is probably more relevant today than it would have been 13 years ago?
I am. This movie becomes more and more relevant every time I come across it. So, we shot this movie prior to the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter mass protest movement. Obviously, the nascent Black Lives Matter movement had existed. But then obviously we saw, and as Yahya was saying, the idea of this movie at its basis was to inspire people to go out and have the courage to protest against injustice. And these 7 or 8 men actually risked their lives to, fight against an unjust war. And obviously it's about, upsettingly, some of the issues that you see in the movie still exist and are still as pertinent as they were there, particularly the systemic racism. In Yahya's character and Bobby Seale, we see the humiliation of a man of great integrity. It's a visual representation of institutional racism when he's brought in shackled into a courtroom, a place which is meant to be the symbol of justice and is the symbol of injustice. So, when we look around the world today and we see the bravery of protesters from Russia to Burma to, the Black Lives Matter protest movement in our country, where the movie does feel incredibly relevant.
Eddie, in shooting a movie like this, and it's an ensemble, was it difficult getting into a rhythm, or how easy was it to when you're working with actors of this caliber, just surrounding you right now? What does that do for you as an actor?
Honestly, it makes it pretty joyful. One of the great pleasures of this film for me was being surrounded by this extraordinary band, and Aaron Sorkin and his casting director Francine had put together a group of actors, all with completely different processes, completely different characters, and it felt like this sort of wonderful clashing of different types of music. So you had a bit of jazz, you had a bit of punk, a bit of classical, all of these things combining. But it's very rare. Normally when you make a film, you turn up for a day or two. Often you don't meet the actors beforehand. It can be quite quick and ephemeral. Here, we were in that court for weeks, and you got to watch some of the greats, whether it's Frank Langella, Michael Keaton, Mark Rylance, to Yahya and Sacha, slog it out. And that rarely happens. And I think we all felt so lucky for that. And I hope it sort of beams off the screen.
What was it like for you, Yahya?
Oh, it was the same. This project felt like theater, to me. Good material is so rare in this business, and I think excellent writing is, at least I've found that it's very rare. So, when I found this was a project that kept me up late at night and got me up very early in the morning for all the right reasons. And I approached this with a lot of enthusiasm. It almost felt like sport. And, for that reason, it was very, very easy to be a part of this project. And that's just on the acting side. On the other side, we were coming together for a really good cause, and so we were able to use our talents to really inspire change or as Sacha was saying, to speak to awakening a moral courage, in the general public. And we felt that we were doing something important. So for me, to be a part of this cast is just really, really an honor, and to have the responsibility that I was asked to, to have in this undertaking was really an incredible journey.
Sacha, it has a very, when I say theatrical, I should say almost like a play, experience. Was this film? Did this exercise different muscles for you when it comes to acting as opposed to other projects?
Well, yes. I mean, you're not planning your escape route, and there's no angry crowds trying to put you in hospital. But no, fundamentally, they're similar. You know, you try and do as much preparation as you can for the character, and then you try and throw it all away and play the actual scene. You know, whether it's Borat or this. I mean, the beauty of this is these are such phenomenal actors, and I'm so glad that the whole cast is being recognized, that I felt it was as easy to act as when I'm doing Borat and I'm interacting with real people. I completely believed every one of these masters at their craft. And so it's a complete joy. But no, you know, when it comes down to it, you know, you're working on the physicality, you're working on the accent, the specificity of the accent, the rhythm of the voice, like Abby's was so unique. Yeah. He really, you know, when he was speaking publicly, he tried to emulate Lenny Bruce, you know, who was for those of you who know, is a famous stand-up at the time. And then obviously costume and hair and just trying to capture the spirit and essence of your interpretation of Abby Hoffman. You know, Aaron Sorkin, our phenomenal director and writer, made it clear that this wasn't going to be a photograph. This was a painting. We weren't doing impressions of these characters, but we were trying to bring their essence to life for this specific period. So, yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic process. And I would say one thing, which is these actors are so good. You know, we were in the courtroom scenes, you'd have a couple of hundred extras. They'd do a scene or we'd do a scene. And afterwards, the extras would start cheering like they'd just come to the end of a Broadway performance. Because that's what it's like. These guys are, you know, some of the best in the world.
You know, you guys are nominated for an outstanding cast at the SAG Awards, and congratulations also Critics' Choice. When did you, and this is to each of you, when did you know that you were part of something very special that was being captured?
For me, it was the first time I read the script. As I said, I knew nothing about it. And what I found was something that was so thrilling, so serious, so funny, and so moving. And then I found out that it had been written 13, 14 years ago and hadn't been made yet. And I just, for the life of me, couldn't understand why. The words were so wonderful. People often say with theatre, like, how can you go and do a play for 6 months, going back every night and doing it again and again? And the answer is you never get it right. You keep going to try and get it right. Often with film, you only have a day to do that. But that's okay, because it's not always necessarily great writing. With this, some of these scenes, when you did them, you got home in the car on the way home and you're like, oh, I could have done it this way. There's exactly. The writing so muscular and full that actually you were just so sad not to get to say those words again. So maybe there'll be a play. I heard that originally Aaron thought about doing it as a musical. So maybe, guys, it will be in the musical version of Chicago 7 at some point.
I've not heard that.
Oh my God, the musical!
You know you want it, Yahya.
I don't know if I don't know if I would touch the musical, but you know, the play. I would touch the play. I don't know about the music.
Yeah, the moment I got on set, and Aaron said, "Okay, let's run the lines." And I remember it clearly, watching these incredible actors. And I felt I was in the room at the time. There was no one had a word wrong, but it was so engaging and believable. Actually, for a moment, I had to remind myself that I was not a spectator and I was actually in the cast. But at that moment, I was blown away. And I thought, this is going to be, just in terms of craftsmanship and watching people who are brilliant at their profession, even if it wasn't an incredible script, and this is a phenomenal script, and even if Aaron wasn't a phenomenal director and hadn't created this brilliant crew around him of, you know, director of photography and the producers and costume, I knew at its very basis this would be a pleasure to watch these fantastic actors, which I was doing. So that's when I knew. I thought, oh my God, I'd better I'd better work 5 times as hard as I've ever done beforehand.
Yeah,
to keep
I had
up.
the same experience. There were two things that happened. One for me was I found myself with this. We did this 2019. I graduated school 2015. I found myself going back and digging through my stuff and looking for my old notes from school and writing my classmates, asking them for particular notes from lessons that we got. I was trying to get everything that I could get in order to prepare for this and in order to, prepare for Bobby Seale. I wanted to step into that room and that table read, and I had to be ready. I had to be ready because of the cast and because of the material. So I knew that it was special because it really demanded me to challenge myself. It demanded me to be special. It demanded me to remind myself that I was special. And so that's when I knew that there was something to this work because of the work ethic that it pulled out of me. And then at the table read, when everybody showed up and really brought their talents to the table, I was just so excited. And it did for a while become a spectator sport, but at the same time, as if I draw out the athlete's analogy or the sports analogy, I wanted to get in at the same time too. So I wanted to play badly, and when my turn came, I couldn't wait to play, and when it was over, I couldn't wait to play again. So, I think that really let me know that in terms of the quality of work, that we were really on to something. But the messaging was always there. The messaging was always at the top and always very, very clear in terms of its importance.
You each have brought up in a different way the challenge, and for everybody I've talked to, every actor I've talked to, when you talk about an Aaron Sorkin screenplay or anything that he's written, it's that rat-a-tat-tat. Is that a challenge for you guys as actors to be able to keep up that dialogue?
Yeah, the only thing I say is the speed of thought. I kind of, you're playing characters, or I was playing a character that was substantially brighter than I am, and so those synapses fire off so much quicker, and so you have to get up to speed to make your thoughts tumble as quickly as some of these great minds that are represented in this film. So that's the challenge, weirdly, is getting your thinking process to their speed.
I think also it was a low budget film, and we knew we had 1 or 2 takes to get this right. So you'd better make sure your first take had better be perfect. Mm-hmm. So that you'd be able to say to Aaron, can I do another one? I want to try it a different way. You've got to give him what he wants the first go. So that was the challenge. And again, these are all brilliantly smart characters. Even Abby Hoffman, who seems like a buffoon, this clown, actually ends up being the smartest man in the room. He actually realizes that the whole trial is just a show trial. And he realizes he has to use it to convince the American public who are watching it at home to turn against the Vietnam War. And ultimately, what these 8 protesters did was they actually ended up shortening the Vietnam War by convincing the American public that it was an immoral act. So even though they went to jail, they lost the trial, they ultimately won.
And before we go, I just want to ask you, Sacha, if I could. You've got multiple nominations, Golden Globe nominations for Borat and for this film. I would think that that's sort of like, when your kids are competing for something, you've got both of your kids, you want them both to win, but how does that feel?
Listen, I'm very happy that both of the kids are getting a chance to be in the game. I don't want to adjudicate between a physical fight between Abby Hoffman and Borat. Borat might pull out some Kazakhstani weapons. I mean, that would be an interesting fight.
Who do you think would win?
I think Abby Hoffman.
Yeah, my money's on Abby.
I know, because I'll tell you why. I read his book, Steal This Book. And basically it's about 3 chapters on how to survive a protest. Because again, a lot of these young kids were going to these protests and they would be, they'd come up against police with their batons who were cracking their heads open. And so those guys knew how to handle themselves as well.
Well, you guys obviously knew how to handle yourselves in that courtroom for all those scenes. Thank you so very much. It's a terrific movie. and we appreciate you guys taking the time to chat with us.
Hey, thank you. Good to see you again, man.
Thank you.
You too.
All right,
Thank you,
take care.
Al.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more with the Today app. Download it now.